Welcome to HR as a strategic partner, turning strategy into strategic action. My name is John Thalheimer. I am the CEO of the team at HR Stories. I am a co-host of the HR Stories podcast. With my co-host, we wrote the best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. We're also the author Guide to HR for Small Businesses. With all that said, here's when I started thinking about this presentation. About a year ago, less than a year ago, I started getting a lot of HR directors, a lot of individuals in the HR realm coming to me and saying, John, how do I get that seat at the table? And of course, we thought about it when Chuck and I talked about it. We went into a lot of different things, but I started really thinking about maybe it's not about getting a seat at the table, but it's helping the organization thrive to reach its goal, right? To thrive and make sure things are happening and do that. And what are the conditions or what are the levers that we can pull to make that happen, right? And so, really kind of looking at that. And so, this is really about what are the conditions that we have control over in HR that can help our organization be more successful. That's how we become that strategic partner. We start thinking strategically about the levers or conditions that we have that we can pull through. And it really started for me about 10 years ago when I was thinking about, and I was really trying to answer this question: why are some employees successful in the workplace and others aren't? And so I started thinking about that, and what I really was trying to answer was, is there a single thing that I could point to as a trust advisor, as somebody that works within the system to help people understand how they could become more successful and how we could help employees become more successful? And here's what it is. Employees thrive when they are able to consistently make the best behavioral decisions available to them in the moment, right? And so one of the things we have to think about, so if I'm going to consistently make the right behavioral decisions in the moment, I need to do that depending on the condition, depending on the environment around me. And so one of the things that we know is that HR and leadership and managers and leaders and supervisors, we all control the conditions in which the employees work in and which the conditions they're making decisions at, right? And so being aware of that becomes really important. So again, summing it up, employees thrive or excel when they consistently make the best behavioral choice in the moment, right? And so that's really important. And so when we think about strategy, and I'm always talking about strategy, and I always say it's this: what do I need to do today for tomorrow? What do I need to do this week for next month? What do I need to do this month for next year, right? And strategy is really going, all right, I know the results I want. I know what it looks like. I know what I want to achieve. What are my priorities to make that happen, right? I only have so much time, so much energy. And then what are the action steps or the path that I need to get to make it there? And so I spend a lot of time working with organizations doing strategic planning, right? And strategic planning is really important. But what I've come to realize is that strategic planning a lot of the times gets put on the shelf, right? It's just put on the shelf. No one ever looks at it, never do it. And what happens is our objectives are achieved or not achieved, to be honest, right? When the employee consistently makes good behavioral decisions. By good, I mean they're working towards that goal, right? They're working towards that goal that the organization has laid out for us, right? So in that moment, right, we're making those right decisions in the moment that is going to allow that company to do. And so going back and looking at what SHRM says, right? SHRM says this about strategic HR. Strategic HR will enable organizations to attract and retain high caliber talent, optimize workforce productivity, and build agile teams that can respond to market changes, ultimately supporting the sustainable business expansion and resilience. And so what they're laying out here is the results of strategic HR. It doesn't lay out how do we get there? What are the things that we do? What are the levers that we can pull to help retain high caliber talent, to attract new people, optimize our workforce productivity? What are the things that we need to do to make that happen? And so when we're thinking about this, when we're looking at this, strategy lies in the daily decisions that our employees make, our supervisors make, our managers make, our leaders make. And we as HR has influence on the conditions that make those decisions easier or harder, right? And so we want to make the path to good decisions easier and the path to bad decisions harder, right? And so how do we do that, and how does that all kind of connect with our organization? And it really starts with that vision, right? What is that future state that the organization wants to reach? What is that future state? And all of us know that, right? We all can go, okay, this is the future state of our organization. If we don't, maybe we need to check out some marketing things. Maybe we need to look at and talk to our leadership and go, what is the organization's future state? What does this look like? Are we going to expand? Are we going to stay the way size we are, but we're going to have stronger impact on the clients that we're reaching, right? And so whatever that is, once you have the vision, now you create that strategic plan, right? This is the place where we're talking about goals, right? What are our strategic priorities? What are the things that we need to focus on over the next 12 months? And what are our goals? What does it look like when we have attained those priorities? And then we get into the minutia and start talking about what are the details? What are the things that we need to do to get us there, right? And so spending time on that. Once we know what the strategic plan is, and a lot of the time we're not in the room, right? We're not in the room, but we have to take that strategic plan and then look at, okay, so what levers, what conditions do I have control over that can influence the organization towards that future state, towards that vision, right? And so this could be our systems, right? We have systems that we use in our organization. We may not call them systems, but you have a hiring system. You have a performance management system. You have a consequences and incentive system in your organization. Capacity, right? And so you have all those, right? And you're creating those systems to increase the ability of the employee to make good decisions and therefore leading the organization to get there. Once we start thinking strategically like this, we have a better connection with the organization, and they're more likely to pull us into meetings, into the rooms, because they start seeing how what we do connects to the bigger picture, right? And so next is the behavioral choices. And this is where I spend a lot of my time in research looking at what are the right behavioral decisions that we need, that an employee needs to make to achieve their goals, to achieve their job responsibilities under real life constraints, right? And so there's this environment that we're working in and levers that we can pull as HR and leaders, right? We can pull those things together that will help our employees make those better decisions. And those better decisions then lead to the results of the organization, right? All these things are connected. Now, excuse me, one of the things that I want you to think about when you're there is using results as feedback, right? So not a negative or positive. We did this, right? We got these results. How did we get these results? What were the conditions? What were the decisions that were made that allowed us to reach this or didn't allow us to reach it, frankly? Because that allows us then to go back and look at our conditions, look at the strategic plan, and adjust that so we know we can maybe go farther down the path. Maybe we can succeed even more, right? And kind of looking at those things, because incredibly important to kind of see that. And so again, when we're looking at this, every time we miss a target or even reach a target, it's the result of the daily decisions our employees are making, right? And so if we work in a restaurant, the success of that restaurant is directly tied to the decisions that the chef is making in there, the wait staff is making in there, right? And all the sous chefs and the dishwasher and all those individuals, those decisions are the ones that are doing it. And take it into a bigger organization. Maybe you work for a big accounting firm. The decisions that everyone is making is allowing you to get to or not get to the results you want. And so HR's strategic role is to help employees, supervisors, managers, and leaders, and owners, let's throw them in there too, navigate cultural environment by designing the conditions that good decisions are much easier and bad decisions are hard, right? So one of the things, and I talk to my leaders and I talk to my managers about this in my classes and my HR people, is that we can't change anybody else's behavior choices. We can change the conditions in which they work, right? We can change those, but they're going to be the ones making the behavior decisions. And a lot of time, let's be honest, we are not there overlooking their shoulder, right? We're in 2026. We are not managing people by looking over their shoulder. They're down the hallway in another building, remote workers. They have to be able to understand the conditions in which they're working so they make the right decisions within the boundaries of employment law. We can't forget that, right? Compliance is important. Values and real world constraints, right? And so we know that there are things going on that are impacting us, but we still want them to make the best decisions. And so when we're thinking about these conditions, we're thinking about a really good strategic plan will flex based on the conditions that are being presented to the organization in the moment, right? And so the employees have to be able to flex to make the right decision, right? And we need to give them the conditions to do that, to make that happen. And so I was talking to Chuck Samikian. He's a director of HR, my co-author and my co-host of the HR Stories podcast. And we were talking about this presentation, and I was going through it, and I was showing it to him, and he goes, "Whoa, slow down, John. You're missing something really important." I'm like, "What am I missing?" And he goes, "Really, strategic influence starts with trust." Oh, duh, mic drop, right? I was like, "Oh, brilliant," right? And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, we need to make sure that I put that in there because it is true." If the people you work with, the executives, the leaders, the managers, the employees, the supervisors, don't trust you, then no matter what you do, it's not going to work, right? And so you've got to build that trust. You need to bring that trust in there to do it well. And so we build trust by consistently meeting the stated and unstated expectations of leaders and employees through reliable execution and follow through. Now, here's the thing that I want to pull out of that sentence. Unstated expectations. A lot of times when we're in HR, the leadership team, the employees have expectations of us that they're not setting. And so one of the things you should have a conversation with your supervisors, your managers, your leaders, your executives. What is your expectation of a well-run, well-executed HR department? Have those conversations. They may or may not be able to tell you what those expectations are, but you're going to get a list. You're going to get things going. You're also going to start paying attention to their behaviors towards you and where they're like, yeah, this is really good. This is great. What are we doing really well? And where they're like, I don't know, right? And where they're giving you those signals. And then you're going to create an understanding where you can build that trust to them. You're going to meet those expectations, even if they're unstated in there. Now, trust isn't enough. You need credibility, right? They're connected. I get that. But we build credibility as HR when we understand the business, right? How does this company make money? How does this company, what's the company's customer? What's the business customer base? What do they want? What they like? What's the risk of the organization? What's the risk level of the organization? What is return on investment? What's the profit and loss statement? Understanding business has to be important, right? And so understanding that and building that becomes really important to understand. Like, okay, this is what the company is trying to do because you have to put your actions into what the company is trying to do operationally, financially, commercially, customer service, right? And so understanding those things are really important about that. So how do we allow employees to make the best decision in the moment? Again, we're not there watching them, right? We're not there, but we can create conditions to do that. So HR shapes the following conditions, and we're going to a little later in this presentation, we're going to dive into each one of these, but I just want to start the conversation so you can kind of see where we're going there. Clarity of direction and expectation. Can we take the vision statement and provide information to the employees, go, this is where we're working towards, this is what we want to accomplish on there. Align and effective systems, right? So we're going to align and make our systems effective. So again, we use numerous systems within the process of doing HR, right? So again, performance management, hiring systems, benefits, consequences, right? All of those things, our incentive programs are all need to be aligned to the organization's stated goals, expectations, right? We need to be aligned in that. We also need to create an environment that is physically safe, right? We need to make sure that we're following OSHA and compliance and doing everything to make there. Also psychologically safe, meaning that we're welcoming people into our workplace of all different stripes, right? We're making everyone feel welcomed, that they want to contribute, they want to be successful, and legally safety, right? That's illegal compliance, employment compliance in there. And then meaningful incentive and consequences, right? And so we need to make sure that the incentives are working towards the goals, but we also need to make sure there's accountability within our organization. So if you do this, the consequences will be this. We will hold you accountable to make sure that you're doing your job. Otherwise, there's going to be consequences, right? And so making sure that's well laid out. And then we have adequate resources and capacity. And that's really looking at, is there enough capacity and resources to do what we're asking our employees, right? But we do this, right? All of these conditions have to be in that the guide rails of the employment law, right? Really needing to understand that on there. Now, let's use a real life example. This is one from a company that I working with, I should say. And I've done leadership training there. That's my big thing, doing leadership training. But we had an employee, right, named Alex, was a high performing client facing employee, right? He was praised for his being responsive to clients. Clients would call, he would pick up the phone right away, get right back. I need boom, 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 right? I needed to get back to them. He would also say yes, right? Anytime somebody asked him to do something, he would say yes, right? And he would try that because he wanted to be part of it. He wanted to do it. He was committed to the organization. He was trusted and well liked. But suddenly, or not really suddenly, but over time, we started noticing, or the team started noticing, that deadlines, Alex wasn't meeting deadlines. It was taking too long to get things done. Internal handoffs were broken down. He wasn't handing off when he needed to do that. His stress and the people around them was increasing. And then the client experience became inconsistent. Right. And so what Alex said, what the leadership team said to me, like, we need Alex to manage his time better. Maybe so, right? Maybe Alex needs to go to our priority management class, right? Maybe that's true. But HR, the strategic question, right? The strategic question is, wait a minute, what conditions is the organization rewarding, right? And which ones are making it harder for Alex to do his job well? So let's break it down. Let's look at this to kind of see what we're doing, right? So here are some of the conditions that we do, right? Direction and expectations. So what was happening was the organization had set client first, right? And so the focus was always on responding to the client within 1 hour or something like that, right? And so everything then became urgent. There was no priority management. It was first come, first serve. Everything was urgent. And so we stopped that. We said, wait a minute, what are we doing? Why is Alex always responding so quickly? And so we looked at and said, we need to clarify the priorities and tie them to our growth strategy, right? And so maybe there are certain clients that have that VIP response. Boom, you're going to respond within an hour. They're paying extra for it. Other ones, we're going to do 24 hours, managing on a case by case basis, right? Creating that. The second thing we looked at were the systems. What were the systems that Alex was using, and were they beneficial to the process, to the growth that we wanted to get? And what we found was the tools and workflows hadn't changed since the beginning of the company, right? And so they hadn't scaled with the growth of the company. And so there was a problem, right? And so we streamlined handoffs and project system management, right? And we created some system management in there to help the organization grow, right? So Alex was really a feedback system, feedback note for us. It was sort of that canary in the minefield going, wait a minute, we have this person that's performing really well and they're not anymore. What's going on? And it's easy to blame, right? One of the things we love to do is blame the person. Maybe it's not the person. And the incentive, right? Responsive was praised. So what we were saying was, the faster you respond, the more praise you're getting. Oh, you talk to those people within 45 minutes. That's fantastic. But we weren't setting boundaries, right? And so sometimes those clients were taking over an hour time. And so we had to set those boundaries too, right? We had to bring those back in there. And then resource and capacity. The company had grown. And so the workload grew faster than the staff. And really, that's an HR thing where you need to know capacity and need to know, and there we need to adjust our planning to make that happen in here. So given the conditions we have created, what decision is most likely? So we have to step back, strategically thinking, stepping back and going, what are the conditions that we created? Are these conditions, and this is why we're having this. So let's now go into our section called From Planning to Action. What conditions can HR cultivate to be more effective? All right, so again, we talked about these 5 conditions. Now we're going to dive deep into each one of them, right? So there are 5 conditions. So let's get into each one of these, starting with clarity of direction and expectation. So here's what we're going to do. At the end of this, we will give you a way to, we'll give you a handout for this, right? So you don't need to kind of capture all these things and see them, because I'm not going to go through each one of these. I'm going to pick out some of the highlights here for each one of these sections, just because we don't have enough time. I don't want to make this, and I can make it a full day seminar if we did that, but I do want us to start thinking about our role when it comes to clarity of direction and expectations, right? Are we helping employees to understand the strategic plan, the future state, the values and behavior norms of the organization, right? And so how do we do that, right? And so one, communication, right? Communication is key, but ingraining it into our daily communication, into our onboarding, our orientation, I honestly think it starts in the interview process. When we talk to somebody about coming to work for our company, we need to be like, man, this is what we're doing. This is what we're about. This is the future state. We don't need to give them our strategic plan, but we need to talk about and be excited about this is what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to be the best restaurant in this part of the city. We're trying to be the best accounting firm that our customers trust us to meet all of their accounting needs, right? And so whatever that is, right, that needs to be defined early on. Once we know what that is, it's our job to make sure that the talent, the employees, are the right employees to make make that happen, right? To make the decisions to make that happen. And so sometimes we're looking around and we have all these great, loyal, great attitude, great people, but they don't have the knowledge and skills. And so we could get rid of them, or we could start training them on the knowledge and skills that they need to be more successful in the organization. And so we have to look around and go, okay, what does my organization need in terms of knowledge? What does my organization needs and skills and capabilities to make this organization successful? If we want to go here, what needs to be done, right? And kind of looking at that. The other thing we want to look at is the job descriptions. Are the job descriptions helping clarify the expectations of that job, right? Are they clear? It's helping them, right? And so kind of going through that. And then training our managers, our leaders, our supervisors on how to coach, feedback, how to present that, right? And so getting in there, all there. And then our performance management system also falls into here. It needs to be aligned with the direction and expectations. And here's the thing that people don't tell you. It probably needs to change every year. As those strategic goals shift, the expectations should shift as well, right? And so we should make sure that we're changing those as well. All right, so that's number one. Number two is align effective systems, right? We've already talked about some of the systems that we have, but you may have a new HRI system. Is that system hurting or helping you be more effective in your role? I talk to people and they're like, yeah, we just got this whole new system and it's taking us longer to do what we wanted to do. And so we can't be effective. But maybe it's taking you longer because other people have now access to that information and it makes them more effective. It makes the employees more effective, right? But that needs to be calculated. You need to think about your HRI systems. You need to think about, are they aligned to our ultimate goals of the organization on there? But outside of that, we need to think about the human-led systems, right? Are we creating, right? Are we creating systems that recognize and influence individuals to be more effective in their workplace, right? And so making sure that the desired behaviors, when we're hiring somebody, do we have a clear system that we follow consistently, not only in HR, but for the hiring managers as well, and for the employees that are interviewing, or even the candidates? Are we creating that there? And the other thing we have to look at is, are our systems causing are carrying barriers or friction for the organization as a whole? It may seem like, yeah, this is a great thing HR-wise in doing that, but does it cause barriers to other people in the organization? And can we figure out a way to reduce those barriers, reduce that friction so it doesn't become an issue, right? And so kind of looking at those things in there. I'm always a big believer about, so here's the thing that I love about systems. If systems are done well, they create consistent decisions, right? They create consistent decisions in your organization. So Chuck and I wrote this book called The Ultimate Guide to HR, the checklist edition. We created these checklists. And what we found where they're most useful is when we can hand them off to somebody and say, just follow the checklist. And they will create that consistency across the board, right? And so getting in there and doing that becomes important. Use data, right? So again, looking at those results, using that data to be like, what do we need to change here? What do we need to look at differently to make that happen? And now we get into physical, psychological, and legal safety. And so our job in HR, beyond compliance, beyond administrative task, is to create this great culture in the organization, right? To create this great culture in the organization, that means the conditions, right? The conditions in which we are working. And so, of course, right, safety is important, right? So OSHA, right, we have OSHA regulations that allows us there, but we can go beyond OSHA, right? And kind of think about, are we physically safe in this work environment? And then we also need to be clear on what we will allow and what we won't allow. One of my favorite things to do is value-based team building. And by that, I mean what I'll come into, and it's like a 90, now it's probably about 3 hours. But what we'll do is we'll define the values of the organization, right? And so We'll have everyone do their own internal values. This is what's important to me, value-wise. We have a whole worksheet, we do that. And then we come back and we talk about what the organizational values are and how they contrast. And then what we do is we define what are the guiding principles for those values. Typically, an organization has already done that, but if they haven't, we do that. And then we talk about what are the behavioral norms for those particular values, right? And so if honesty is your value, then maybe not gossiping behind people's back is a behavioral norm, right? And so kind of looking at that, and that's just a great exercise to do because it really helps the team connect, understand each other, but also understand how we should operate within this. Of course, right? So part of our job here is to make sure that we do not have discrimination, not harassment, not bullying, not ethic violations, not stealing from the company, right? We need to create processes and systems that don't allow that to happen, but we also need to take care of it if it does happen and make sure there's consequences for that person's thing. And so part of this becomes training our leaders, training our managers to be like, hey, this is how you handle that situation. Here's the role play. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to make that happen and get that across, right? So again, there's levers in these conditions that we can pull to do it. Here's the thing that I don't want you to do. I don't want you to go look at this list and go, okay, you're going to do all these things. You're not. You're going to pick one from each one of the lists and go, okay, here's what I'm going to focus on first. And you're going to say, what can have the biggest impact on my organization, right? And so it may be something different for every organization out there. Number 4, meaningful incentives and consequences, right? So incentives are the rewards and recognition programs that we use, maybe our performance management, our annual reviews, all of that is incentives. You want to incentivize people working effectively. You want to incentivize people being more effective in their role, to have stronger impacts on the organization. Notice I didn't say working harder, right? Because it's not about working harder. That's not what you're trying to incentivize. You're trying to really incentivize what matters to the organization. So going back to the vision, going back to the priorities and the strategic plan, going, all right, what can I incentivize so these things happen? That these things are really happening in there. And so maybe it's maybe it's a bonus structure. Maybe it's higher salary rates, but maybe it's a recognition program that recognizes the values of the organization. Breaking those down and doing those things can be really powerful to make sure that you do that. And you're going to align those rewards with your desired outcomes, right? And so performance management, and this is where I say performance management changes every year. It changes because the expectations of the roles change, the expectations of the organization change, and so you're going to have to look at and do those things that are going to happen in the organization. The other thing I want you to think about is consequences, right? And so consequences can be both good or bad, but there needs to be clear consequences based on behavior. Right. And so if you want to have good consequences to reward good behavior, and you want to have negative consequences to reward negative behavior. Right. Because again, you're changing the conditions in which that employee is working and do that. Here's the challenge. The lack of accountability I see in organizations. The lack of accountability. Organizations are not holding their employees accountable to that. They let them slide. They go, well, they'll get it. Oh, they're new. Or, oh, well, they were really busy last week, so I'm not going to hold them accountable this week. Then why have accountability, right? Why have consequences? And so you have to do it, and they need to be fair. They need to be consistent. They need to be across the board to get there. And you need to be as transparent as possible to get across there as well. And the last one may seem out of our league, right? May seem, well, that's not HR, John. We don't handle the budget. No, but we can inform the budget decision makers by giving them more information so they can make better decisions, right? And so we can look at workloads. We can assess how much workload. How much is going on? What is the capacity? What's realistic capacity for an individual, average individual, not our star performers, but the average individual on how much they can do in one day, how much they can decide in one day. And then the other thing we have to do is pull back and look at our staffing levels across the organization. If the shift is over to this product line, let's say, that means I need more people on there, meaning where are we pulling people away to move them over into that area, right? And so it becomes this strategic thing, not just this, oh, we need more people over there, let's hire people. What are we going to do about this? And this is where training, knowledge building, skill building, all of that comes in to make sure that we're doing that to get across there. The other thing that we have to look at is, are we giving them the appropriate amount of tools that they need to do their job, right? Are we doing that? Are we making that happen on there? And then really partnering with our leaders, talking through, what are you trying to do? How are you trying to accomplish it? How can I, as the HR, work with our talent, make sure we have the capacity in there? And the other thing that happens, right, is that we have heroes, short-term heroics to get something done. When we see that, when we reward that, we also have to stop back and go, okay, wait, how do we do this long-term? How do we make sure that we don't have to have short-term heroics on a regular basis, right? And so kind of managing all that becomes important to kind of see in there. So let's look at a real life example. So I work doing executive coaching for this leadership team. I'm also their leadership trainer and really kind of bring people in there. And so it's a $20 million sales company. They make about, in sales about $20 million a year, 75 employees and growing spectacularly. And so I want to kind of talk about, how does this work? How do we do this in real life? And so they had these three strategic priorities: smart organizational growth through better client service. So what are the conditions that we can help control to make those things happen? Number two is, how do we improve organizational systems using current technology, right? And so what can we do? And by current, they meant what's on the market, not what they started with, right, back in the day. And then enhancing the employee experience. So what I want to do is break down enhancing the employee experience so you can kind of see some of the levers that you can play with to help the organization grow. And so let's start with enhancing the employee experience, the condition of direction and expectation, right? And so one of the things we did is we went back upstream and looked at the job descriptions and said, are these clear for the employees to know what they are doing? Are we missing anything? Does things need to be taken away? Does the purpose align with the organization? And then we sat down and said, okay, so we know, right, the expectations are kind of defined in there, but let's take it a step closer. Let's really clarify what that expectation is. And so we did some values work again, and we went in there and said, okay, so what are the norms? What are the behavior norms for this role within the organization? And so when we started talking about that, we also talked about, what does success look like? How do I know that I am successful in this role? One of the best questions you can go back and ask your supervisor, go, how will you know that I have been successful in my role? Right? Because that's where you should be putting your energy. This helps, right? When we're doing this for employees, it helps them get the energy in there and know what they need to do to make that happen. Really important, right? And so we do that, right? We went through that. We did that process. The other thing that we looked about is the onboarding process, right? We looked at the onboarding process to go, are we doing a good job of giving them situational awareness on what is expected of them in this role while we're onboarding them, right? So really important. And then we started looking at safety. And so for safety for this, it wasn't since it was an accounting firm, it wasn't like, oh, we need to worry about warehouse and that kind of stuff, but it was more psychological safety, people being discriminated against, harassing, bullying. What are we doing in those cases? And so one of the things we did not have was a clear process to give communication. Who do I communicate to? Who is that person? Now, we love them talking to their supervisor, but that wasn't always the best option. And so we wanted to give them a person in HR. Please talk to this person. This is the person that will help you. And then we also, right, not only did we set that up, what we asked the HR people to go out and meet with teams and talk to teams and be proactive in their communication around safety, bullying, harassment, and discrimination. So they know, right, the employees know there's a place to go for that as well. And then the last thing we did is we looked at our incentive packages and looked at, were they rewarding the behaviors that we wanted, right? Were they in sporting engagement and performance? And we went through, we kind of reevaluated them and changed it to get the things that we needed from those employees, that engagement piece, right? Making that employee experience even better to get there. And so it took time, right? These things don't happen overnight, but it takes time to kind of think about strategically, what are we going to do? What actions are we going to put in place to make that happen? Again, right, looking back here is we've changed some conditions. We looked at the behavior choices people made. Now we can look at the results and see what feedback we're getting from those results to go back and adjust slightly the conditions we have, right? And so we can go back and do that, and that allows our employees to make those better decisions, right? The goal here is to consistently make better decisions in there, right? So again, we're designing conditions that shape the everyday decisions of our employees. And so that's the end of the presentation, this webinar, as it were. We are the team at HR Stories. So the team at HR Stories has been around a couple of years, and we have started helping organizations redesign the conditions. We go through and go, okay, what are the results that you're getting? Let's go back. What are the decisions the employees are making? Let's not blame the employee. Let's look at the conditions, and then that will tie into the strategic plan, the vision of the organization. We can meet in those conditions and really kind of do that. So a couple of things that we can do. Number one, go check out our website, team@hrstories.com. Note just the team@hrstories.com. Check it out. Listen to our podcast, the HR Stories podcast. We have 148, 150 episodes coming up. And where we talk about how HR can get it right, how leaders can get it right, how small business owners can get it right. This function, this HR function, is so important to the health of the organization. We want to make sure that you're getting it right. And then finally, don't forget to read our book, The Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. It's a bestseller on Amazon. Go check it out. Just put in Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. It should appear there for you. And then engage with us. Reach out to us and let us know how we can help. We would love to be partner with you. Guide right along with you why you're doing this, why you're getting this better. And maybe we're that bandwidth, and maybe we have the way to talk to the leaders to get them involved and get them up to date and really make sure that we are now a strategic partner with HR. And honestly, that's how we're going to get to that table, right? That is how we get to that table, by being that strategic partner first. That will allow us to get to that partner. Thank you for listening so much today. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully we'll hear you on the podcast. Come on and stop in on the podcast.